Hi, my name is Sam Miskovich. I have been covering the video game industry for over 25 years, for the likes of the New York Times, Ars Technica, the Dallas Morning News, the Atlantic, and a lot of other places. What I haven't been doing a lot of is video, if this creepy horror film lighting, framing, and other issues indicate that. That being said, I want to try something new. Turn on the camera and start talking, whether about a game I'm really informed about or with someone else in the industry who is informed about it. And in today's case, I'm starting off with a series that's tentatively titled You Really Should Play This, about a game that I have taken time with, that hasn't been rushed because of an embargo or any other pre-release hype. In this case, it's a game that's not out yet, but I've been playing it for a little over 2 years, so I thought, let's turn on the mic and talk about it so that you can get some thoughts and insight about it without any spoilers. Because this is one of those games that's really fun to play if you treat the spoiler situation just right. Welcome to Animal Well. There's a few ways to go with talking about Animal Well. Why we're talking about it, how it's gotten a little bit of hype, how it's similar and different to other games in a genre that is traditionally known as Metroidvania. But I kind of want to talk about just the feeling of it. The game is incredible at evoking things in a wordless, beautiful visual wonder. The first time I played Animal Well, I was kind of floored by all the little sparklies. I've played a lot of old school games, and if you're looking at the screen right now, you're seeing a very chunky NES or even Atari level of pixels, along with a screen effect that looks like an old CRT. I can safely say I've never seen this kind of game with chunky old school pixels look this beautiful. Animal Well is programmed to utmost precision. It lifts its world of chunky pixels to these new technological heights. There's reflections, there's iridescent lighting, flows of water, streams of particles, physics reactions, tricky background effects. Everywhere you look in this game, there's technological intentionality. It's like a film when you notice all of the little pieces tucked away in every scene, a red telephone in one corner, a certain set of books with words and names and letters on them. They're all placed there for a reason. And video game cinematography is different, where you as the player are sort of directing the camera lens. But when a game maker entrances with this kind of technological wizardry, it's hard to miss it. And it makes you want to dig in and go, what's behind that? What's beneath that? Why is that changing when I move a light from here to there? Oh, I don't want to say too much. Also, do you like animals? Because Animal Well likes animals. Rabbits, dogs, cats, chinchillas, snakes. Sometimes they're running around. Sometimes they're looking at you. Sometimes they're in statue form. Or not quite. Animal Well just has animals you don't see. Again, chinchillas. How often do you see a chinchilla in a video game? I think it's easy to forget that that's fun. And that kind of insertion of random animals, when done in a way that asks questions or makes you wonder what's going on, is really just playful. And then there's this concept of wordless wonder. I mentioned it before. Video games are all about inherent language. Sometimes you need an instruction manual, or you need a little box to tell you what to do, or you need to have played all of the other games in a genre, because game fans heighten up every single release, every single year, to build off of the wonder that came before. You can't make a Super Mario-like game without assuming that people have played Super Mario before, is at least a faulty assumption I think a lot of game makers make. Animal Well starts out with just a button, and then a direction. From there, one more button. And you really staggers on just the tiniest bit with a little bit of text to indicate the name of something you might have picked up, or a basic small nudge. It otherwise wants you to figure it out. What? Why are all these things here? Why am I taking and doing this? Animal Well is much like a really great film or story that understands you don't have to answer every single question, whether immediately or later. That's not to say Animal Well doesn't have a story and doesn't have a build from small bits of information to much greater pieces of information. It does. But it gets you there in a way that you can hand, I really believe, to anyone and say, can you press directions and a couple of buttons? Great. Like, honestly, a 2600 joystick would pretty much get you there. Might need a couple more buttons. But I like when gaming begins with that kind of simple language in how you propel its art forward. And Animal Well does a really good job with that. Real quick to insert somewhere in the video, this is not a combat game. You aren't wielding a sword, you aren't getting a gun. I can't think of anything in the game that comes up later that's really about combat. There are conflicts, there are aggressive animals. I'll just say that. It's not entirely passive either, but no, this is as cozy as a dangerous exploration game gets. Does that make sense? Cozy yet dangerous? Animal Well. So I've been showing evocative images and I've been saying evocative things, but what is Animal Well? I used the phrase Metroidvania before, which is a specific type of game where you go somewhere, you see a locked door, it has a specific type of weird key, you get the sense you need to go elsewhere to get that key and come back. But what if that kind of game had completely different doors and locks than any other game that's come before it? Maybe instead of walking up to a door that is frozen and going over to the other side later and finding a flamethrower and saying, oh, duh, fire destroys ice. I've seen this before, whether in a comic or a movie or a game. What if you go up to a thing and don't even realize it's a locked door until you explore around the world and you get something that you didn't even realize was a key? Animal Well, I get a tingle even just saying this because I think about all the different moments where Animal Well says, we don't care about convention. We want to hand you different weird things that you haven't seen in a story of coming to age or hero's journey. It's not swords. It's not bows and arrows. It's not the language of Tolkien or Dungeons and Dragons or any other sort of fantasy prototype. It says, here's the crap that I found in my own childhood drawers. I, as the sole creator, a guy named Billy Blasso. Just one person, by the way, who made all of this. So when I talk about all the technological wizardry, just one person who's done all of this coding, all handcrafted. This game actually works on the worst computers. You can load Animal Well on a crappy old computer and all these really cool effects all play out. I know, I'm kind of losing myself. This is a game that lets you do that. So I guess we could call this a thesis that Animal Well does new things while looking very old. It compels new kinds of interactions while looking very classic and familiar. It opens up the language of running around, jumping around, and using items to exploring game mysteries that I have never seen. Now, that's not to say other games haven't been complicated and haven't had sort of a mix of the basic opening, what you do, and a big mystery behind it. And anyone who talks about video games a lot will notice really obvious inspirations. Fez from the mid-2000s is a particularly obvious inspiration point. The game even has a tiny little hat tip to Fez at some point. If you're unfamiliar with Fez, it's a great game to go for. Really cheap, plays on computers and old systems without a lot of issue. They're very different, though. And Animal Well does strike its own identity by not creating sort of a lead character or a lead narrative or a really obvious, you are this kind of person and therefore have to complete this task. Really, the baseline is beauty, wonder, and animals. And it is interesting as you go along to see different animals act in different ways, and you rummage through your very weird pack of items and figure out, what do I do? I'd mentioned bunnies. They're in the game. What do I do to deal with a bunny? And then I don't want to list off the items you get. I don't want to list off all the species because it is fun to just wander through and find all of this stuff and then figure out what's going on. I suppose I can quickly add, how have I been playing this game for about 2 years? I attended something called Summer Games Fest in 2022, sort of in the wake of when E3 collapsed. Lots of big name games, some silly things that I didn't really care about. That's par for the course for a games industry promotional event. Animal Well was in a little circuit of indie games, and for whatever reason, its schedule was packed with only 4 minutes per game. And Billy, the sole creator of the game, was there showing it off. Sheepish, clearly just not his kind of event. I later learned he'd been working in AAA studios for a while and just decided he wanted to make a game that he would love. So he's there showing me the game, and I could just tell. I could see it instantly. There was a immediate shared language and excitement over what a person can pack into a game and what you can communicate. Thoughtful all the way through in only 4 minutes. I looked at Billy and I said, "Can I please play this game when I go home?" And he said, "Email me." And then he sent me a developer build code. I've had access to most of the game's builds since summer of 2022. I've saved them. I will keep them forever, backed up on multiple drives. Because eventually, once I get through however many hours the main final Animal Well takes to beat, I want to go back to each of those builds and explore them. And maybe I'll do a video about that someday. Today's not that day. But if you're into it, let me know. So let's get to the point of why I'm even hitting record and doing this. Not just that you should play this game, but how should you play it? I'm really moved and inspired by the game. I've really enjoyed sharing it with my family, where we sit on the couch and look at not just the trippy animals and the beautiful framing in terms of color and technological effects, but also the questions and the discoveries and the "get over here, I just made this thing happen." There's been a lot of that in the house. If what I've shown you and what I've told you has been compelling, I recommend giving the game 10 to 12 hours. Unspoiled, no Twitch streams, not even sharing with friends if you can help it, to get through that first chunk. There's a threshold. It's obvious. At that point, this is when I recommend opening up the game. And it's kind of interesting. The people who are making Animal Well opened up a Discord server, a place to chat and talk about Animal Well before it's out. And once I reached that point, I went to that server where I saw people sharing experiences, asking questions. And I'm really glad I waited, because that's a really good point at which having that chat, having that "how did you do it? What did you experience?" works in the game's favor. So that might be when you hop on a Twitch stream and say, "Okay, I want to be part of a community to explore it and figure it out." As opposed to that very opening chunk, which I think really is intimate. Animal Well's intimacy is unusual because it is handing you delicate concepts and saying, "This is just between you and me. Don't go looking it up online." It's okay. Once you get through enough of it, there's a lot more of the game to get through. If you're the kind of person who says, "I don't need a game to have a bazillion challenges and secrets, I just want to sit and enjoy something on a weekend," Animal Well's good in that way. You've got that 8 to 12 hours that's really satisfying. It suggests that there's more to do. It suggests that there's more to see and discover. But you don't have to. You get a lot of interesting, compelling content from that point. You will probably be compelled to keep on picking at it a little longer, which I think is when talking to other people and saying, "I don't need to bang my head against a wall now that I've reached a certain crazy challenge level," because it does get a little intense in terms of trickier jumps and trickier moves and even just harder discoveries that really require a group think for puzzle solving. That stuff comes up. I've enjoyed being part of something bigger by getting to that point in Animal Well. I also am glad that I got through that first 12 hours, shared it with my family, and had that to take away and think about how games can have a different language from here on out. I'm always looking for that, whether it's because I find an old game that was skipped over by a larger population in favor of whatever was huge in its era, or because some sort of indie game isn't a full, interesting experience, but has a nugget of humanity that I want to draw out and think about as I move into the rest of my artistic life. Animal Well has a lot of that. So let's review. Animal Well was created, programmed, designed, drawn by one person for the most part, and packs a ton of visual trickery and wonder and mystery and imagination into, I want to say, 33 megabytes, which is, I mean, just on the geeky level, I'm like, how do you do it? And also has this really interesting, playful take on doors and keys, on what is actually a barrier and what is actually a way to open that up, and making you stop and go, oh, I would have never thought of that. It's really clever all of the time. All of the time. I can't stop thinking about it, and I don't want to spoil, again, anything. And I think some promotional materials for the game, officially from its creators, have spoiled a little bit. So if you've already seen those, sorry, you still have a lot more to go, I promise you. And I'm just going to stop here. I think I've said a lot. I really think that Animal Well is cool. I'm really glad I've gotten to play it. I have not beaten the game. I've seen teases for wild levels of completion. I've seen teases of things that cannot be solved by just one player. I think I'm going to stop there. Thank you for hanging out with me. I want to try this in the future. I want to hear what you think of this as a spoiler-free / please try out this thing I'm excited about kind of video. I could make more of them. I'm also looking into interviews with really interesting people, much like I've done for GameDeveloper.com and other outlets. So please talk to me. sam@samred.com is my email address. Easiest way to get in touch, or comment below, or wave hello, or I don't know what people do anymore. Like, comment, subscribe, share, bell. Yeah. But mostly go play Animal Well. Go have fun. Thanks for hanging out. Bye-bye. Animal Well. Does Animal Well have labradoodles? I don't know. What do you think, Mabel? She's not really into being content just yet. We're getting there.